Yo, what is up, guys? Cool 412 the Fox here. Now, anyways, after the last 3 episodes of the first films, I was amazed on how far that this series has come and gone, but precisely how far this series is already turning out to be. I'm having so much fun getting a chance to review some of the greatest horror movies of all time to ever started off, not just from the 70s, but also the 80s. And soon we might be heading down the road throughout the 90s. But right now though, folks, before we get there, we're on to the sequels. From Halloween, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th. But I think we're on to one of the best sequels of the Halloween franchise. And I'm talking about Halloween 2. That's right, everyone. We're on to the sequel of what looked like to be a conclusion of what happened to Michael after surviving, and still on the run, from his archenemy, Dr. Loomis. But yet, though, Laurie Strode, on the other hand, survived. But yet, though, folks, only thing I could say is, let's get started on a Halloween night that I don't think nobody forgot about. And I would say is, man, did it have to really take place in a hospital? I was shocked out of my mind knowing where the story took place, but only thing I'm going to say is, folks, let's get started on this review of Halloween 2 and what the conclusion was of what happened of the sequel. The movie begins taking us place to Haddonfield, Illinois, after what happened at the ending of the conclusion of the first film. As mentioned in our previous review of Halloween, it was where Laurie Strode told Tommy and his friend to head over to the neighbor's house and call the police. But by the time that they got out of the house, same thing happened. They ran out, and Dr. Loomis showed up, and played by, once again, the late great Donald Pleasence. And I think Donald really pulled off his role as Dr. Loomis for over the years, until his final role in 1995, which we will get to in a while until after the other films have been done and reviewed. But anyways, as Dr. Loomis ran right into the house, Laurie Strode still fought back against Michael and took off his mask. And it showed what happened at the end of the first film. Michael was shot 6 times and fell off the balcony. And as once before, she said, it was the boogeyman. And Dr. Loomis said, as a matter of fact, it was. As he went to check and see if Michael was okay, or if he was down and out like a light, but however, when he looked, he was gone. And then one of the neighbors was just like, what the heck is going on out here? And he told him, call the police. He's still on the loose, he's dangerous. He's like, what is this? Is this some kind of Halloween joke in the dead of night? And Dr. Loomis said, you don't know what dead is. Or precisely as they both said, in the death of night? And as he said, you don't know what death is. And then it takes us straight to the title card. And yet, I gotta admit, the jack-o'-lantern was always a good touch. And it told the story of Halloween because it's an annual holiday that takes place in one of the traditional holidays. Sorry folks, I'm a little mixed up today. Anyways, is an annual holiday that takes place every once a year on October 31st. And one of my all-time favorites, because every once a year I would always dress up as one of my favorite horror movie characters when I was younger. And yet, sometimes once a year, I would cosplay as a zombie on Halloween night. And still, one of the best holidays I always love. But anyways, it took us straight to a POV, once again, point of view, where Michael escaped, unharmed it looked like, and he survived. Walking through the alleyway, seeing trick-or-treaters run by, and a dog barking right at him. And that was where Dr. Loomis ran into the sheriff once again and explained that he shot him 6 times. But he was still around and he's still on the loose. But as the sheriff drove off with Dr. Loomis trying to find Michael, it led to where Michael walked into a neighbor's house as they were watching TV, and from the looks of it, they were watching Night of the Living Dead. And a zombie horror movie I thought I would never forget. And that's where Michael picked up another butcher knife from the neighbor's house. As she went to make her husband's sandwich again after watching the news of what happened to Laurie Strode, it was gone. And when she looked at it, she thought it was PB&J, but no. It was something scary, which was blood. And she screamed out of her lungs. Then the neighbor next door was wondering if everything was okay. But she was on the phone and heard the news over the radio of what happened to Laurie Strode. And she asked her friend over the phone, when did it happen? But however, she heard a noise in the house. As she went to investigate, Michael took her out. But like I said, I don't want to get into the details of what happened in all the other films, because, yeah, rules are rules, but what can you do? Anyways, that led to where, throughout the film, I was immediately stunned that the ambulance and the news reporters were there, and Laurie Strode was taken to the hospital. But the medics on the situation were wondering, do you know this chick? And they said, yeah, that's Laurie Strode. Goes to the same high school with my brother. And that was where, throughout the film, I was stunned because Halloween is usually a fun tradition of giving kids candy. But I don't want to go into the details of what happened to a young man where his mother took him to the hospital. It was brutal. But anyways, it led to where they got in, they want to see a doctor to try to help him out. But however, that was where it led to bad to worse. Laurie was being brought into the hospital, and the doctor came in and realized it was a stab wound. And they gave her a tetanus shot. They heavily sedated her to make sure that she was just asleep to try to get better. And the medics were looking on. But however, in the dead of night, Dr. Loomis and the sheriff were still looking for Michael. But the sheriff was not having it, any of it. He was not happy with what he's doing. And that was when Loomis saw what looked like to be Michael, but it wasn't. He had a gun and was scaring the trick-or-treaters. Then, I don't want to go into details what happened here. That was where the guy in the costume was taken out by a police car and a news reporting van. And oh dear, it was brutal. It was on fire, and so was the guy. But dang, just dang. I never knew what to expect throughout this film, but thus far though, that was where Loomis realized what he had done. And he couldn't believe what he was seeing. And they left the scene trying to find Michael. But then, at the hospital, it was where Laurie woke up, just wondering what was going on and what was happening, and where she was. But the medic that was friends with her told her what was going on. But the nurse walked in, strict about the job, told him to leave, and wanted to check on Laurie to see if she was okay. But she was alright, still recovering. But then, that's when we cut to Michael, still out on the loose, while walking through the town of Haddonfield, until a young man dressed up as a cowboy was holding a boombox stereo, and Michael overheard the news that Laurie was still alive and safe. So, he headed down straight to the Haddonfield Medical Recovery Center, But while at the hospital, we get introduced to a whole cast of characters, which are the nurses, the doctors, and the medical staff. But throughout the film, it's where I thought I was like stunned out of my mind. Am I seeing a cast of actual actors playing medical doctors and everything else? But to my surprise, the story was really good. But anyways, throughout the film, they keep watching the news about Michael and everything else that's going on. But then that's where it leads to the other plot of the story, that the security guard was watching Night of the Living Dead as well. And Michael was on the surveillance camera, but to my surprise, I was like, what are you doing? Never watch a movie or read something while there's someone out there and out on the loose and dangerous. But anyways, it's where throughout the film, that was where things were already turning into a surprise for me and everyone else. But that led to where Michael snuck in without being seen, but then one of the other nurses came in late. They had their talk about everything that was going on. But then Lori was still having a talk with one of the medical doctors, which was the medics of the ambulance. And I think they were close friends, it looked like. Then the nurse came in, explaining the situation, that she needed rest. But Lori asked if she can call the police, tell them where she is. But the phone lines were out, and there was something going on. Then that was where the security guard called for what looked like to be one of the workers to try to investigate what was going on, but he gave her a two-way radio to explain the situation. But that was when we did see what happened next. As he went to investigate, he expected the garbage can saw something, but when he looked again, he got frightened by a kitty cat. But when he went to investigate again, he saw everything didn't seem right in the hospital, and he told her to call the sheriff's department at once and the police. But however, she couldn't understand him or hear him through the radio. She tried fixing it, but when he went to get on investigating, it was until Michael took him out with the hammer. I was like, what the heck? That's brutal. But I don't want to talk about what happened with that hammer, but anyways, that's where we cut back to the hospital with everyone else involved in the story. And it was until the medic doctor, what looked like to be a medical doctor, I think, that was in the ambulance, explained to Lori about Michael and everything else, and she was stunned. But then the nurse came in again and told him to leave. So it looks like they were trying to talk and have their conversation. But then, as we get another point of view of the hospital, Michael stuck to the shadows, not to be seen, of what was going on throughout the film. And then we cut to Dr. Loomis and the sheriff at the what looked like to be an autopsy ward, trying to find out who this kid was that was dressed like Michael. But while in the other parts of the film, that was where it got stunned enough that the deputy came in and explained that every resident was at the Myers residence like an angry mob, and they were not happy of what was going on. But deep down in my mind, I was stunned, like, oh my god, this film got turned into Frankenstein immediately. What was I seeing? But they arrived and calmed down the situation, and they were still trying to investigate on what was going on and where Michael was. But then we cut back to the hospital, And we see a younger Laurie Strode as a kid in the flashbacks. And she visited her brother Michael. Well, she didn't know that she was actually Michael's sister. But when she got to the hospital, she looked on at a younger Michael who was looking at the window. He turned his head and looked at Laurie. And yet, thus far though, I think it was an amazing flashback sequence that I thought I would never see. And it really told the story between Laurie Strode and Michael Myers. But anyways, then as we proceed into the film, we see a nurse wondering who was in the hospital, but it turned out to be her boyfriend, and she was not happy that he scared the living daylights out of her. But I don't want to go into details on what happened, but that was where Michael took them both out. But anyways, then we cut to a school where the officers and Dr. Loomis were investigating. Saw that it looked like Michael broke through the window. And there was a drawing of a family. And that was where we see someone pulling in with the nurse from the first film. And the butcher knife was already, most precisely, the chef's knife was already on the picture of the little girl, which was a message. As Dr. Loomis realized, sister, that's what he said. But then we see the nurse running in from the first film, and that was where they see a word on the wall in the words of Sam Hain. And to my surprise, the story is related to what happened in Ireland of the legend of Sam Hain. And yet, my last name is Irish, and it's kind of shocking to see how far the movie would go. But to my amazement, my family last name is Irish. But it has history attached to it. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Anyways, it led to where throughout the film, that was where Dr. Loomis was still investigating with the officers, but the nurse wanted to speak to him in private. It was where they were talking, and the nurse was under strict orders by Dr. Rogers to order Dr. Loomis to come back to the hospital. That's Miss Grove. But that was where, after all the chaos that was going on, they didn't want to tarnish the reputation of the hospital. But Dr. Loomis refused to leave, but it was ordered by the governor. And he kept refusing, but that was where she explained to him that there was a marshal waiting for him outside. And to my surprise, throughout the film, I never knew what to expect. I guess, from the looks of it, I guess Dr. Loomis didn't want to give up until Michael was either captured or destroyed. Whatever the two would be. But anyways, moving on. We then cut back to the hospital where they were trying to figure out a way to get Laurie out of there, knowing how dangerous it's getting. But then Laurie was unconscious, but when they flashed the flashlight in her eyes, something was wrong. Now, one of the other workers went to find the doctor. But when she found him, oh gosh, I don't want to go into that detail either. He was taken out by Michael. She got scared out of her mind, and then she was taken out from behind and didn't see Michael coming. But while throughout the scene of the film, the nurse and the medic were trying to find everyone to get out of there, then that's where it led to bad to worse. Where it led to where Laurie was still in her hospital room, but then all of a sudden, Michael walked in with a syringe. But when he tried taking out what it looked like to be Laurie, but however, When he removed the blankets, she was gone. And it looked like Laurie Strode was still walking and trying to get out of there on her own. But when the nurse came back to see Laurie, she realized she was gone. But that led to bad to worse, where back at the school, the marshal and the nurse was trying to get Loomis back to Smith's Grove, and they drove off. While back at the hospital, Laurie tried to use the phone, but still it was out. The more she kept walking, trying to find a way out. But while outside, the nurse realized all the tires were slashed and the gas line was cut. When she went back inside, Laurie was still walking through the hospital to find her, trying to help her, but then Michael was right behind the nurse and took her out. Man, I don't want to go into details of what happened there either, but dang. And then after that, the chase was on. Michael kept chasing Laurie throughout the hospital, but Laurie Strode, played by the legendary Jamie Lee Curtis, which I think she pulled off an amazing performance throughout the Halloween franchise for years. But yet, it's still known as one of the cult classics of all time in Halloween history. But anyways, as she kept trying to run, and she found the security guard after being taken out by Michael, just like what happened in the first film. My goodness. And that led to where the medic found the other nurse that was taken out by Michael. She was done. And he slipped on something and was knocked out, it looked like, and it was done. More likely, he was done. But anyways, as Laurie tried to run, that led to where she jumped over the window and into the other side of the hospital. When she got in the elevator, she was scared and thought she was done by Michael, but the elevator door closed just in time for her to reach the other side of the hospital to run outside and into a car while waiting to look like to try to escape, but to try to hide from Michael. Well, we cut back to Dr. Loomis and the nurse, along with the marshal, trying to get him back to Smith's Grove. They had their talk about Sam Hain and everything else that went on about Halloween. And that was where it was revealed that Michael's parents passed away. It was 2 years. And that Dr. Rogers got the medical records of Michael. And it was revealed that Laurie Strode was actually Michael's sister. And she had no idea that was her brother throughout the film franchise. And he was upset about it immediately and tried to get to the clinic, which is the hospital. But that was until that the marshal refused. But however, knowing he was under strict orders to head back to Smith's Grove, it was where Dr. Loomis pulled out his gun and demanded to head over there. But however, he shot the window of the car. Then they finally turned around and went straight to the medical clinic. And man, I have to admit that so far throughout the film, I never knew what to expect. But it really, really shocked me. But I guess, knowing Dr. Loomis, he was desperate to make sure that Michael was taken out. Or more importantly, either captured or destroyed. Because he still called him a monster. But anyways, as we were reaching towards the end, we see Laurie Strode still in the car, trying to make sure that she was seen and out of sight till the medic came in. And she thought if he was okay or not. He tried starting up the car, but nothing. He pointed out that we're getting out of here. But that was until he was done. And I was stunned out of my mind to see that. I just thought he was just like either knocked out or something, but shocked to come back for one more scene, I guess. But anyways, it led to where Lori got out of the car. She saw headlights pull in, which led to the marshal and Dr. Loomis, along with the nurse. She tried screaming for help, but when she tried walking towards them, she sees Michael behind the red light. And I thought, my God, it's like the devil himself, of the boogeyman. And she made it towards the glass of the doors, screaming for help. And the marshal and everyone else saw her, and they brought her in. But Michael walked right through that door like it was nothing. But once again, Dr. Loomis shot him 2 times. And he was out like a light. It was until the marshal tried to check up on him, but Dr. Loomis explained to him that he was dangerous. But then, throughout the film, after the nurse left to get to the radio to call for help, the marshal went to check on him again. He said, "Stay away from him." He said, "He's not breathing, he's done." But then Michael took out the marshal, and they ran right to the surgery room. And it led to where Dr. Loomis gave Laurie Strode a gun, but she was too scared to use it, and she says, "Go on, take it." But then Michael came right through the surgery door, showing off his power and his strength. And immediately I was stunned by that. I don't even know how he got through that door with that kind of strength and velocity. But anyways, as he got right into the room, Dr. Loomis tried to take another shot, but realized he was out of ammo. So Michael tried to take him out and got him right at his chest. But I don't want to go into details on what happened next, but that led to where Laurie picked up the gun and would try to tell him to stop, but she shot him right in his eyes. And I don't want to go into the details on what happened next, because this scene was kind of shocking to me, like something straight out of the Terminator. But anyways, they light up the fuel lines and everything else, and that was where Laurie ran out of the surgery room, and Dr. Loomis said, "It's time, Michael." And he lit a match, most precisely a lighter, and the room blew up. As Laurie thought she was safe, Michael started walking towards her. But then he fell to the ground, which signified the end of the film. Then, later during the day, the medic arrived. More likely, new medics arrived, and of course, the nurse was helping her to the ambulance. So they got her to a new hospital to make sure she was safe. And at the end, like leading into the end, we hear the song, "Enter Sandman." But it's not Metallica related. This was an old school song. As it went, "Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream, da 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 da." And thus far though, this film I believe was amazing to watch. And Halloween 2 has a lot of history leading in from the first film, which everyone thought Michael Myers was gone. But to be honest, the sequel I think has a lot of potential to be a cult classic, and it still is to this day, along with the other films. So I give Halloween 2 a solid 10 out of 10. Just man, who knows what could happen next in the third film before we get there. But anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this edition and episode of a Halloween Nightmare on Friday the 13th. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, turn on post notifications so you guys do not miss any more amazing content like this. And another episode of a Halloween Nightmare on Friday the 13th. Thank you all so much for watching. And be sure to tell my friends I said, "What's up?"